Everyone agrees that Breece Hall is a great football player and one of the best young running backs in the NFL. But after a season where he had a torn ACL and now coming into a season with a new quarterback, many don't know what to make of his fantasy value this year. Today, I'm going to go over Breece Hall as a player and as a fantasy prospect to determine whether or not he's a good value for your draft in 2023. Breece Hall is undeniably an incredible talent. He came into the NFL as a second-round draft pick by the New York Jets, being taken out of Iowa State after he completely dominated the college landscape over the course of his multi-year career. He was a back-to-back All-American in 2020 and 2021, and he set numerous records at Iowa State that probably aren't going to be touched by that program for decades. Hall was really good in his rookie year with the Jets. He only was able to play 7 games before going down with an injury, but in that time, he averaged 5.8 yards per carry behind PFF's second lowest graded offensive line. To put that into perspective, that was the best out of any running back in the NFL that had 50 or more carries on the season. He also had 5.3 true yards per carry, which basically just means that his production wasn't inflated from a few big runs. If you start to really dive into the advanced stats too, it gets even more impressive than that. For example, he ranked 3rd in yards created per touch, meaning that he was one of the best running backs in football at creating opportunities for himself and making the best out of what was a bad situation with his O-line. Even more impressive than that, he had the best juke rate of any running back in football at 50.5%. I mean, he was consistently making defenders miss, and you can see that clearly on tape. This type of elusiveness is rare to see from a rookie running back. To put icing on the cake, he also had the second best breakaway run rate in the NFL at 11.3%, which further demonstrates that he's already one of the most explosive running backs in the NFL. To the despair of fantasy managers everywhere, his promising rookie season was cut short by a torn ACL that he suffered in Week 7 against the Denver Broncos. Leading up to that point, he already had 70 yards in the first quarter of the game before getting hurt, but regardless, he had to miss the remainder of the season while he rehabbed that injury. Hall's ACL injury is the main issue for fantasy managers going into 2023, but there's some reason to be optimistic about his recovery. For one thing, he's a young and explosive athlete, which we have historically seen makes it easier for him to come back faster and more effective when he's actually healthy. Another thing to consider with his injury is that his torn ACL was a simple one, as opposed to somebody like J.K. Dobbins who blew out their entire knee. We saw last year he wasn't able to get back on the field when he thought he was, and when he came back, he struggled a lot. So that shouldn't be as much of an issue for Breece, and he should be able to stick to the recovery timeline that they have set for him right now. All reports out of minicamp indicate that his recovery is going well, and there's real optimism that he's going to be ready in time for Week 1, and that seems to be the way that he's trending right now. In terms of players that he's going to have to compete with for carries and catches on this team, there's not really much to speak about. They still have Michael Carter hanging around for his 3rd year in the NFL, but he hasn't been an overly effective player over the course of his career, and it doesn't really seem like they're committed to giving him any real work on this offense. Beyond that, they just have 2022 undrafted free agent Zonovan Knight and 2023 5th rounder Israel Anabakanda. The team didn't invest heavy draft capital into either of these players, so they're really not much of a threat to the bell cow role that Breece Hall currently has. One situation that could cause some issues for Breece Hall's fantasy value is if Dalvin Cook ends up signing with the Jets. He's been linked to just about every team in the AFC East at this point, but the Jets seem to be frontrunners, and he could very well end up signing there. If that happens, he's certainly going to vulture touchdowns and some carries from Breece Hall, which will sting, but it won't make him completely irrelevant for fantasy purposes. As long as that scenario doesn't play out, everything else looks pretty good for Breece Hall's situation on the team in 2023. This offseason, they made a blockbuster trade for eventual Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers, who has been known to support fantasy running back ones throughout his career. Last season, Rodgers had an 8.3% checkdown rate, which was in the top half of the NFL. And given that a big part of Breece Hall's game is his pass catching ability, that bodes well for his future outlook. New York's offense should be better this year as a whole, with Rodgers leading things rather than Zach Wilson, Mike White, or Joe Flacco. And that'll lead to better quality touches for Breece Hall, better efficiency because the defenses will have to actually prepare for the threat of a pass game, and more touches in the red zone and possibilities for scoring. There is some cause for concern for Breece Hall this year because of the ACL injury that he's coming off of, but it's more or less already baked into his ADP. Right now, he's being drafted as the running back 12 and the number 29 overall player in half PPR league formats, which means that you can get him in the middle of the 3rd round in a typical 12-person draft. He's barely being taken as a running back 1 right now, and he's going around players like Najee Harris and Travis Etienne in ADP. I mean, come on. The man averaged 4 more points per game than Etienne last year and 3 more than Harris. I think he's clearly better than those 2 players in terms of talent, and he's also in a better situation overall with Rodgers now. He's primed to get more work than those 2 on one of the most improved offenses in football, while the other 2 have concerns with players further down on the depth chart eating into their workload. Overall, I think it's safe to say that Breece Hall is one of the best values in fantasy football drafts this year. You can get him at a discounted ADP in the 3rd round, and he's one of the few players in this game that can actually finish as the running back 1 overall. The ACL injury is less than ideal, but he's a good bet to make a strong comeback because of his youth, athleticism, and when the injury actually happened. Fantasy football overall is about winning championships, and you need talented players like Breece Hall on your team to make that happen. Even if there's some risk, that's a controlled risk you need to take, and you can't be afraid to do that in your draft. Talent has a way of overcoming all obstacles in fantasy football, and I think it's safe to say that Breece Hall is one of the most talented running backs in the NFL. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more content like this, make sure you subscribe down below and turn on post notifications so you don't miss a beat. Also, make sure you like the video and leave your thoughts in the comments below. And make sure to follow us on our socials on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at FallBallSports.